And lastly, we need to make it matter by promoting self-direction. So this means helping your learners with goal setting at the beginning based on your objectives and their learning paths, frequent check-ins and progress monitoring by teachers, peers, and themselves, self-reflection and analysis while you're going, but also at the end, having them think about what did I do well, what could I work on for next time, and citing specific evidence. So, not just saying I did everything well, but really having them go back and prove their thinking. Promoting self-advocacy for students to reach out when they need more support with their learning goal. If they're doing check-ins and they feel like they're not progressing as they would like, or if you've given them feedback in a conference and they're not really sure what to do with that, making sure that they're advocating for themselves and requesting another conference or seeking out some help or guidance. And I think it's important for us as teachers to remember that we need to model what that looks like. So when we just say, let us know if you have a question, going deeper than that, talking about what advocacy means and acting out with a student or creating a video to show them, using sentence strips, helping them with that language so that they feel safe, comfortable, and valued when approaching you or someone to ask for help, and that they have the tools to be successful with that. This connects to UDL Principle 6, which is provide options for executive functions. Guideline or checkpoint 6.1, guide appropriate goal setting. I would definitely do this once we've determined our learning goals and objectives, and make sure to have a graphic organizer for that so they have a little guidance, making sure it's specific and measurable and how they'll know if they've mastered that goal. Support planning and strategy development, 6.2. Facilitate managing information and resources, 6.3. And enhance capacity for monitoring progress, 6.4. So those checkpoints are a great blend of both teacher and student responsibility. We kind of need to set the stage for planning and strategy development, managing the resources and having them available, setting up tools for monitoring progress, and then modeling that and then letting them go, letting them be the advocates and be in charge of their learning, and know that you've set them up for appropriate grade level success. When we determine the learning path and instruction, methods, materials, media, our environment, a lot really goes into this. I'm going to kind of touch on the learning environment first. In order for a learning environment to be conducive with regard to learning for different learners, it should have the following components. Be designed to match the goal. Spaces for independent work or collaboration, flexible seating, space to move, to meet, to get materials easily. Students should feel comfortable fluidly moving around the room and have access to what they need to be successful. Secondly, offer resource areas accessible to all. So having math manipulatives in a clear space where people in your classroom know where they're located and can get them freely. Anchor charts where all can see them or move to them, interact with them, and math reference materials that are together in a clearly labeled basket or part of your classroom library, or if you have a math center. Also, we should integrate digital resources and materials. So the great thing about integrating digital resources is that they have a lot of these wonderful add-ons like the read aloud, the opportunity for speech to text, the many, many benefits of Google Classroom via collaboration, turning in assignments, feedback, online math reference tools through specific websites, online manipulatives, they can manipulate clocks or number lines, video lessons that I could make accessible through a program that we use at my school called Zern, websites for practice, and also digital access also gives students, most students or all students in my specific school, the opportunity to get these materials at home. So they can also be working on these things or thinking about them or sharing them at home. Fourth, highlight the learning processes in the environment. So make sure that the strategies that we're discussing and that they are practicing are shown. Make sure that they're up in the room. Frequent feedback, posting student work. So if they're accomplishing great things or if they're working together and showing collaboration on chart paper, posting that so students can get excited for each other, and also that can serve as great encouragement for kids who might need a little reassurance. Having check-ins for students to get peer-to-peer feedback, and really just focusing on celebrating the process over the product. I think that's a huge thing for all of us to remember. And finally, ensure access to the target goals. A learning goal is stated in the classroom, like posted. I would write it on the board or on an anchor chart. It's referred to orally, so they're hearing me say it aloud or they're saying it aloud with me. And we're discussing it as a class, whether that's the opener or we're coming back to it, kind of like a mid-math class interruption, just as a kind of like check-in. Let's remember what we're working on today, like check ourselves. Is this what we're working for? What could we be doing differently? What can we celebrate? And also it can be used as a great closing topic of conversation, almost like your reflection before they go back to their homeroom or before you transition into the next class. Consequently, a learning environment can be prohibitive with regard to learning for different learners. If it, for example, has desks in rows and there's little to no time for collaboration, or students are working in silos with very little feedback. And in these circumstances, I feel like the teacher is seen as the keeper of the knowledge and not a facilitator. Resources and tools would be minimal. It would kind of be a one-size-fits-all mentality, a math textbook only. The learning goal is held by the teacher and the teacher only for planning purposes and wouldn't be shared with the class. The UDL framework influences the learning environment because from a UDL point of view, all learning situations should capture learners, teachers, and the design curriculum. Classrooms should be designed to support intentional movement through the space as well as cues for behavior and academic supports. The idea of a learning space as an instructional tool is directly connected to the UDL approach and can impact student learning. As I touched on earlier, gaining interest through connections to real life and their own interests and being able for children to see how everything is connected to time and the way that time plays a role in our lives is very important. Asking such questions as where would we be without time? If time was in existence, what would change? What would be better? What would be worse? What did society look like before we had clocks to tell us the time? Just getting them to think critically, historically, and making connections between content and real life. Individual goal setting. So examples for a range of goals, as I touched on a little bit, would be quite broad, especially when we're thinking of third graders and measurement. So it could be anything from telling time on an analog clock, converting time, elapsed time with just hours is huge. Then it could be introducing hours and minutes. And extensions could be elapsed time transitioning from AM to PM or elapsed time over 24 hours. Potential learning activities that would go with this experience would be activities that would make sure to be going back to our goal, that everything should connect back to that goal. So we could practice reading the clock throughout the day in the classroom, matching analog or digital clocks, matching phrases like 4:30 to 4:30, writing times throughout the day in our math notebook, or just turning and talking to a partner at random times throughout the day. We could practice converting time, elapsed time strategies using manipulatives, number line, or the algorithm, small groups, partner work, Google Classroom tasks, strategy groups, partnership, reteaching, using time in morning meeting and in other subjects such as social studies, language arts, and even during a classroom read aloud. And then the performance assessment would be the planning their dream day, which I have shared so far in this module. So determining the learning paths for the learning experience that include gaining interest, individual goal setting, potential learning activities, and performance assessment. A plan needs to be developed that addresses each of those following areas, and also why they would be important. The type of experience that would need to be developed in advance would include the anchor charts, technology, just making sure that that's prepared and ready, manipulatives, rubrics for anticipated learning goals. Obviously, that would need to be edited based on the student goals once we got involved in the unit, as teaching should be responsive. Talking to other teachers in the building to kind of prime them for collaboration, maybe letting a 4th grade or a 2nd grade classroom know that we might have students interested in sharing their dream day and giving a little lesson on time. I would want to have the performance-based open-ended tasks prepared ahead of time, and also the rationale. So my experience with teaching and math progression lets me know what I should have beforehand. That's my rationale for this list. A lot of teaching is going to be responsive to their needs and goals, but I would plan to have these things prepared based on my experience as a math teacher and instructional coach. Some instructional practices should facilitate learning for all students. This could include some of what I've talked about earlier and other new ideas such as student presentations, mind maps to build connections, guest speakers and lecturers, active learning techniques in groups, online collaboration, and even Google Hangouts. If it was something that was more lecture-based, it might look like having a visual outline to go along with it, group activities throughout the lecture to pause and give them time to think out loud and communicate, and the use of stories and read-alouds to support a lecture. Instruction should be simple and intuitive, designed in a clear, predictable, and consistent manner, while also being welcoming, inclusive, and encouraging of risk-taking. All of these instructional practices facilitate learning for all students. At times, a student might not feel like an instructional practice is appropriate for them. Ensuring that we have choice, alternate means of materials and supplies, and knowing all of our students and who they are as learners is very important. In terms of the materials that need to be available and considerations that would need to be made, traditional materials and media are fixed. So the content is fused to the material and it can't be separated. Like, for example, the text in a math textbook can't be manipulated. It is what it is. But the UDL approach encourages us as teachers to use materials that are flexible and present concepts and skills in a variety of ways to better meet the needs of all students. So this could include a digital text, which a lot of programs and companies have more and more available these days. And that would allow students to make text bigger or smaller, move from text to speech by highlighting it and being able to listen, use headphones, highlight key ideas and concepts as needed, have the content read aloud to them, be able to comment on it, and really engage with the text more and have opportunities to play around with it.